What's up, everybody? It's Andrea. Today, we get the worst time travel explanation of ever. We would 1000% go to that Klingon festival, and we ask the question, where in the universe is Picard? Stay tuned.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we are breaking down Season 7, Episode 21, Firstborn. This episode was written by Renee Echevarria and directed by Jonathan West, which is not a name I've heard before for a director, but I didn't care enough to look into it, but that name seems new to me. Here's what's going on in Firstborn. Worf is visited by a mysterious Klingon saying Worf's brother Kern sent him to help Alexander grow into becoming a Klingon warrior. What are your initial thoughts on this one? I mean, bum-ish.
Bum.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my initial thoughts were that I really like this episode. And one of my, this is what I put in my notes. One of my favorite parts was seeing the Duras sisters again, because I really like the Duras sisters as characters. I like that they are interesting and they seem have different dimensions, and they show Klingon culture from a different perspective from what we've only seen with Worf and a tiny little bit with Kern, and then all the council nonsense. It's like they bring something different. They're not good guys, but they're not total bad guys either.
They're kind of like Romulans. They're like, they do whatever is best for them.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And they're clever. And so I was like, oh, we get to see them again. This might be our last time seeing them actually in TNG. And then the other thing I was excited about was that Worf finally realized Alexander has his own destiny apart from Worf's wishes, which is another reason why I really love this episode. Now, I'll say after watching it, I love it for completely different reasons than my initial thoughts. But my initial thoughts were extremely positive. What about you? I know Klingons are not your cup of tea necessarily.
Yeah, I don't super remember this episode. I do remember the twist at the end. And I was like, Alexander, I just wrote one word. Pass. That was all I wrote. I was like, I'll pass on this one. I don't want to watch this one. I don't want to see Alexander being whiny. I don't want to see, his dad yelling at him. And I don't want to see all that. Turns out I was completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I actually did enjoy this episode mostly. The ending was really dumb, in my opinion. But Alexander, this is the first and only time we see him where he's behaving more like age appropriate. Where, he and Worf are still having conflict, but it's like healthier conflict.
Yeah, it's more mature.
He stands his ground and says how he feels, but he does so in a way that's not disrespectful. He only storms out 4 or 5 times, which sounds like a lot of storming, except Alexander in every other episode has stormed out 6,300 times an episode. So it's like we only see him storm out I think 2 or 3 times this episode, where I was like, okay, that's all right.
Yeah, I think we see him leave twice. But you did also say that in what was that? Oh, in the episode in Rascals, that he was age appropriate. Right, because he was a kid being kids.
You're right. He was a very, very little kid. Yeah.
So that was age appropriate as well as this episode, but that episode really wasn't about him. He just happened to be in the nursery with the other kids,
which I think is a really great way. This is where there was another episode with kids that we had a few weeks ago where
he wasn't in it. It was masks. Yeah.
Where it's like, why wasn't Alexander in there making a mask with Data or making a whatever
making something out of clay?
Yeah, that would have worked. But yeah, no, this episode, my initial thoughts were, I really don't want to do this one, because I don't like the Worf Alexander dynamic. Alexander is always fucking whining about something or screaming about something. And I understand, he is trauma informed. He's had a horrific childhood and he's been
super annoying.
Shunted from one place to another, and he's super annoying. Yeah. So let's just jump right into it. Worf seems to be practicing this speech when Alexander runs in and he's laughing, and another kid is in pursuit of Alexander. So they're playing some sort of tag in the hallways.
This is the kid who was doing clay in masks.
That's what I was like. Where were you? Okay.
Yeah. So apparently this is Alexander's BFF.
Yeah, it totally is, because it's the one other child aboard the ship, apparently. And he hits Worf with a water balloon, but kind of a cool looking water balloon. It looks like a soccer
water
ball.
Balloon. It kind of looked like a brain to me.
Did it? Oh, I thought it had a hexagonal kind of shape, on the pattern. It kind of looked like the skin of the water balloon looked like it was made out of clay or craft foam or something. It just reminded me of a pink soccer ball.
It was very cool.
Then when you hit it, it explodes in its water. And I was like, ooh.
I want one. I know, right? It's very cool. So anyways, Worf gets hit in the face.
with water.
And Alexander's like, no.
Yeah.
Because it's like he's the last person in the world to be like, oh, ha, 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 children. This is almost
having
as bad
fun with stuff.
As bad as Picard being hit with a water balloon.
Oh my God. That was Picard being hit with the snowball, right? When Wesley and that
with
other
the virusy snowball or whatever that was.
Now,
with the holographic snowball that he got. You know what? We're not even going to. We're not even going to visit that.
We're not even going down that road again. There isn't enough time in the world to go back and break that one down and everything that was wrong with it. Virus snowballs. All right. So this scene is actually pretty refreshing because Worf, number one, is refreshed by water, and number two, he's like, Alexander, where have you been? I have been waiting for you. You said you would be here at such and such time, and you're wasting time with foolishness. But he didn't yell it. He kind of said it sort of the way I'm saying it. Yeah, but like not yelling. And Alexander,
which you think he would, especially since he just got hit in the face with water with a water balloon. He was totally unaffected by that. He was just like, whatever, moving on. Like, where have you been?
Girl,
and this is not cool. And you're like, wow.
Had this been season 3 Worf, he would have just beheaded Alexander right then and there.
And he would have put a phaser to that other kid. You know how Worf is. Shoot first, ask questions later.
Blow a hole through the view screen at the space net, ask questions later. Worf is not our smartest character, I'm going to have to say. But, well, I guess he's the most reactive. But at any rate, Alexander is so much bigger now. I felt like such a mom being like, look how big you are. Like, he's so big. And Alexander, when he gets this stern talking to, he does not shirk away from it. He doesn't do the like, well, my friends, well, but sometimes he was like, yes, I'm sorry. And here is the speech that Worf was like very nervously practicing. I thought he was practicing a speech to like give at a reception or something. He was practicing
because he's wearing this like cool outfit that looks very ceremonial. So you're like, okay, what is this going to be for?
Wearing like the Klingon duster vest. Yeah, I was like, okay. So he tells Alexander it's time for his ascension, a passage into warriorhood, and you're almost at your 13th year. And I was like, oh, it's a Klingon bar mitzvah. This is your thing. This is awesome. But Alexander is like, well, what if I don't want to do that? Like, what if I don't want to be a warrior? And I thought, I love this because Alexander has been raised in and around Starfleet and with humans who don't value violence over, or like warriorhood or whatever, over like intellectual discussion and conversation and diplomacy, right? So it's like, it's so natural to me to think like, yeah, he has been raised in an extremely
non-Klingon environment, really.
Yeah, non-violent like community.
Well, because I don't think warriorhood is just violence. Like, I know the big effort is like your fighting skills, your batleths and all of that. But I don't think being a warrior is just violence. I think being a warrior is about honor. It's about discipline. It's about valor. It's about courage. It's about strength. It's about family. It's about identity. I think it's way bigger than we just like violence. Yeah. And while I think a lot of those characteristics are shared amongst Starfleet personnel, right? Valor, courage, and all of that. It's not their most important thing. Like having an honorable death is the most important thing for a Klingon. And the people in Starfleet don't think about their deaths at all, let alone them being honorable. And when people die, they're sad. You know, they're sad and they have a ceremony for them and they say like they were a very good worker and all of this, but it's not about their honor. It's not about their achievements as far as what they contributed to the community. So I do think it's more than that. And I think it's a huge cultural piece that Alexander has always been missing because as he points out, his mom told him he doesn't have to do all this Klingon stuff if he doesn't. Yeah. So he has never really been exposed to his culture from his mom at all. And then when he moved in with his dad was trying to like force it down his throat. But you got to remember, Alexander is the only Klingon child on the entire ship. Where's the reinforcement going to come from? Like his friends aren't also being like, yeah, we should be warriors. His friends aren't playing with batlets. His friends are like, the culture is not there. So Worf, similar to Worf's parents, having to introduce him to the Klingon culture on Earth, right? He has to be the sole person to introduce his son to the culture. And he was like so excited for Alexander to be the best little Klingon he could be. And Alexander was just like, why? This has nothing to do with me. Like I don't need to.
And my mom said I didn't have to do this anyway.
Yeah, my mom told me I don't have to. So I don't even have to invest in this or learn about this. And I think, at least this is my opinion as a non-parent. I think most good parents just want their kids to be happy, healthy, and safe. And in Worf's mind, this is what will do that for Alexander.
Yes.
Him becoming like the best Klingon he could be will make sure that he's happy, healthy, and safe. And since he doesn't want to do that, it's like, striking terror in Worf's heart, then what are you going to do? Like, you're going to be sleeping under a bridge, with a cardboard box. Because what else are you going to do? They're not going to accept you in Starfleet, and they're not going to, because then they're not going to accept you in Starfleet because you're too Klingon, and they're not going to accept you on Klingon because you're too Starfleet. So where will you fit?
Yeah.
And I think that's where this is all coming from, although he probably can't articulate that. And certainly Alexander couldn't understand all of that at his age.
Yeah. And I was thinking too about Kalar, and like her relationship with her culture was not very strong. Like,
right.
She was half human, half Klingon, and she thought the Klingon stuff was all kind of dumb with all the like fighting and stuff, right? And so she was like, warrior this, warrior that. Like, we live in a time where you don't need to be a warrior anymore. Like, peace, diplomacy, and tact, and like intellectualism, whatever, right? Like, so she was very not comfortable with that Klingon side of herself, and she tried very hard to repress it. And as we saw a few times, she let it get the better of her, and she's like fucked up some tables and stuff, like when that would all come erupting out of her. And I was thinking about how her unresolved feelings with her Klingon side affected Alexander to the point where she told him, like, you don't have to do this. And so Alexander was like, oh, okay, cool, I don't have to do this thing, because Kalar always looked like down on her Klingon side. And it just kind of made me think, like, you can have whatever feelings you want about your culture, but if you express it in a certain leading way where you're like, you don't want to be a Klingon, do you? It's dumb, right? You don't, right? So of course Alexander's like, okay, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, she, even from beyond the grave, is like informing Alexander's decisions about how he's accepting his Klingon culture,
about his life. Yeah.
And I'm like, Kalar, that was maybe a little short-sighted, boo. Like,
well, because I would go further
for himself.
Yeah, I would go further. I would say she despised her Klingon side because she said that, like, I hate everything about me that's Klingon. And it's but that is half of you. And I don't think Alexander hates it, but he nothings it. Like, he's completely indifferent about his culture. And I feel like I'm not an immigrant, but I feel like this might be something that immigrant children might experience from their parents who immigrated, and they want them to assimilate because they want them to be happy, healthy, and safe. So it's like, do not speak our language, out in public, maybe not even at home. Maybe they don't even teach their kids their native language because they don't want them to have an accent, or
I
they
can speak to that. Totally.
Yeah. And you're like, and the reason they're doing it is to keep their kids happy, healthy, and safe. They're not trying to do anything mean or bad. They're trying, it's the very opposite. Right. But what happens is these children might lose important parts of their culture or just not be connected to it as deeply. And then when they're adults, they might feel like a sense of loss, that they don't get to share and stuff.
I definitely feel that way. My dad immigrated from the Czech Republic and my mom immigrated from Colombia. So I'm a third culture kid where, like, I had to find kind of a space in between. And my dad really was very, very strongly against, like, he never spoke Czech at home with us. Like, only if my grandmother visited would he speak Czech. Like, he would cook the food because he was an amazing cook and the food was delicious, but everything else about the culture, like, we never heard stories or tales. We never had, like, there's only one tradition of, like, one thing we would do at New Year's Eve that, like, I guess is pretty common out there, but it's like, but that's it. Like, one New Year's Eve tradition that you do that has to do with some food that you cook. So, but that's it. Like, and every time I asked my dad to, like, speak Czech at home so I could learn it, he was like, why? It's dumb. Like, you're never going to use it in Southern California. Like, your best bet is to, like, focus on your Spanish, which I was like, yeah, but it's not like one or the other. Like, that's not how our brains work. But I didn't have that kind of tool to be able to explain
the language.
Yeah. But, like, yeah, I completely get that, where it's like, I feel like I'm totally lacking, like, part of that culture. And it was my dad's attitude about his own culture because he had left during a period of, like, extreme violence. So, like, he fled to Germany, and then in Germany he got, like, political asylum because there was, like, so much political unrest going on in the country. And then from Germany he, like, immigrated to the US because I think he lived in Germany a few years too. But even still, like, I don't know anything about it. He would never speak about it. And so I think it was definitely his drive to, like, have us assimilate as much as possible with American culture and have American kids so that we would fit in, because going back to the Czech Republic at the time of the, like, Soviet Revolution was very, very, very dangerous. It's like, yeah, no, we can't do that.
So basically your dad was Kalar.
Yes.
Maybe he didn't necessarily hate his culture, but he definitely didn't want you to get involved in his culture.
He did not. Yeah, he didn't. So to the point where it's like, we know no stories, we know nothing. Like, my dad's life from before I was born is just a big
blank
question
space.
Mark mystery. Yeah, which I hate that. I fucking hate that. Like, I wish I could know stuff. My mom talks ad nauseum about all her things that she did back in the day, which, like, I prefer that to being like, who were you, though, before you were a parent? I have a whole life before I was a parent. Hold on. Who were you?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And so the same thing is going on with little Alexander, right? Is that like Kalar had her own issues and was anti-Klingon. Worf has his issues because he was raised by humans, but he's like held on to the culture. He's done the opposite. He's held on to the culture with his like teeth, like I'm going to wear a baldrake every day. Like I'm going to practice the rituals. I'm going to teach Klingon Tai Chi. Like I'm going to learn the batleth. Like I'm going to really, really immerse myself. And so now Alexander's caught between the two. And we find out later that Worf says, I want to honor his mother's wishes, which I thought was really beautiful because he could just be like, well, your mother's gone and I'm in charge now. But he didn't. He's trying to like honor that by not saying, no, you do have to learn your culture. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And this is a case in this scene, which we're only like 30 seconds into the episode. Worf tells Alexander, Alexander says, my mom said I never had to do that Klingon stuff if I didn't want to. And Worf says, well, I mean, it is your decision. But he says it kind of like ... like he was going to say more. But as soon
Alexander's
as he says,
like,
great. As soon as he says it is your decision, Alexander stands up and he says, great, I don't want to do it. See ya. And he runs out the room. Like this is first storm off.
Really does. He really did storm off.
Son, there was a hello? Like that's it.
And credits.
Yeah. And so it makes sense that he's honoring Kalar's wishes to not be like, come back here. You have to listen to me. You have to agree with me. You have to do what I say.
Yeah.
He's giving him the space that his mother wants, which has got to be a really tough situation too, because she's gone, so he's like compromising with the ghost.
Yeah.
They can't talk about it. They can't.
There's no winning that. Rough. There's no. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when credits are done, the Enterprise turns out it's delayed at doing some shit. So like, it looks like each department has a little extra time to do the things they've been wanting to do. So, Picard's got the team in the observation lounge and he's like, all right, go ahead and tell Spectral Analysis that they could have some extra time on the arrays and go ahead and I just totally pulled that sentence out of my ass and I'm quite proud of myself. I was like, wow, I've been trekking so hard.
Right? Because I put missions delayed. That's all I put.
I thought you were gonna say.
No, that's all I put because I know they were talking about stuff and doing stuff and that, but that's all I got from it. Mission delayed.
I really just pulled that out of thin air and I'm like, yeah, that tracks though. That totally tracks. Okay, I'm one step closer to integrating in the universe. All right, so Worf though is pretty distracted. And Picard is like, Mr. Worf, can I see you for a minute? And I was like, somebody's in trouble, right? But Picard is so great. He's like, hey, is everything all right, buddy? Like, normally you're so laser focused that we have to like tell you to take time off. Like, what's kind of going on? And Worf says, I'm having trouble with Alexander. And I wrote, well, get in line, buddy. Get in line. Everybody's having trouble with him. Not so
when
much
are you not having trouble with this kid? But I do.
It's like, again, huh? Again? Okay.
I love Picard's his like response though.
Oh my God. Wasn't it the most, it was like peak Picard. It really was. He says, there's this Klingon festival that's happening soon. And there's like a nearby colony, like an outpost that will surely be celebrating. And it must be that like, he's not feeling the drive to do his bar mitzvah because he's not feeling like in touch with his Klingon side. So like, why would he want to do that? So like, there's that colony that'll be celebrating this thing. And Worf is like, yeah, but it's like 3 days away on a shuttle. And I love it. I love it. Picard goes, on a shuttle it'd be 3 days, but like the Enterprise can get you there in a fraction of time.
They can get you there in an hour. Yeah. And he's like, I can't ask you to take the entire ship around the freaking nebula or whatever just for me to go to this colony. And Picard's like, are you kidding? Stellar Cartography would love to see more parts of this nebula.
Yeah.
Go ahead and engage, number one. It's just like, boom, like we're moving the whole ship just for you and Alexander. How sweet is that?
Go pack your solid cylinder lunch pail and just go, So they're at the colony. There is this, I did enjoy this ceremony.
This entire like play, this like festival? Musical play that everybody in the crowd could be a part of.
Yes.
That was the coolest.
Okay,
I was like,
thank you.
I have that.
Not a single pain stick involved. It's a ceremonial dance.
This was beautiful for Klingons.
Yes, it's a ceremonial dance that's like historically derived story. It's a reenactment and there's batleth fighting, but it's like air fighting, so they're not actually striking.
So no one gets hurt. And everybody knows the rules and who you're supposed to be and like who is supposed to win and who's supposed to lose. And it's a song that everybody knows the words to.
Yes.
And anyone could jump in and like join in. I was like, this is so cool.
It reminded me so much of a family friend invited me and my mom and my family to this, like, they're Mexican and they're very Catholic. So Las Posadas is this thing where they kind of reenact on the 24th. Like, I'm not religious, but I love Christmas. But I was like, yeah, let's go, whatever. It'll be fun. You basically reenact Mary and Joseph going from door to door, trying to find a spot so that she could have the baby, right? And like, so it was like a group of like 10 kind of like carolers, essentially, like all dressed in like biblical garb or whatever. And they would like run to the front door and sing their song and like, let us in, a baby's on the way, or some shit like that. And then everybody'd be like, no room in the inn. And so they'd run to like the front door, and everybody would go clamber to the front door and do the same song and dance until like somebody in the garage would be like, there's room here in the fucking,
oh wow, so this is the same thing.
So it's the same exact thing. So everybody knew the words. And I was sitting there eating my kettle corn being like, this is kind of cool. Like, everybody knows the words. Everybody knows their role. It was really neat. And it totally reminded me of this. Alexander is in rapture. He is so into it. And he's like, right? Like, he's so
into it, to the point where Worf actually jumps in, because at one point, the guy says, like, who will challenge me? Which we only know because somebody asks Worf for an interpretation. I think it's Beverly. And Worf is like, oh, he's asking who else will challenge him, and no one else is jumping in. So then Worf's like, all right.
Hold on. I'm loving that, like, Starfleet is also like, we want to come and see.
Starfleet is all, and Starfleet is into it, right? Like, they're all mixed in with the crowd. They're cheering along.
They're eating their kettle corn.
Like I would be doing too. So he's like, he's asking for challengers, and he's looking around and no one's like stepping up to the challenge. So then Worf is like, I'll do it. And he jumps in and he does the song and dance and like falls to the ground. And then he's like, who else will challenge? Who else will challenge? And Alexander, adorable little Alexander, runs up and he's like I'll take it, father. Yeah. And he pulls up the bat left. And you're like, oh my gosh. And the guy is just like, what? Who is this? Like, he's like, who's this little kid? And then Alexander does the fake fighting and he wins. And then like the main, Kalis pops up, and Alexander runs over to Worf and he's like, okay, what's going to happen now? Because this is his first time seeing this festival. So he's like, what's next, Dad? And he's like, well, Kalis is going to come by and he's the only one who could win in all of this. And you just see them like really enjoy this festival. And what a fun father-son moment.
See, and this would not have happened if Picard, of all people, had not been like, and I say Picard of all people as though he's been very anti-Klingon, which couldn't be further from the truth.
No,
he was like,
that's why he knew about this festival.
Yeah, he was like the main right-hand man to the High Counselor. So it's like, you knew the shit. But like, this is so cool. Like, yeah, Alexander's like, what comes up next? And Kalis the Unforgettable shows up and defeats the tyrant. And Alexander is so into it at this point. He's like, oh, hey, man, like, there's a gah cart rolling by. Like, can I get some hot gah? Yeah, nightfall, comes, and Alexander is running to Worf to ask for money because some huckster is selling peeks at some Klingon's mummified head in a box.
It was supposed to be the head of Molar, and Molar was the guy he was fighting in the ceremony.
Yes.
And so he's like, but it's the real Molar. And Worf is like, the real Molar died like thousands and thousands of years ago. It can't be him.
Though.
Yeah, then he goes, yeah, it's mummified. That's how we know it's the real Molar. You're like, wow, this guy had an answer for everything to this little kid, didn't he?
Made me feel better because I love that carnival tricks and snake oil salesmen still exist everywhere. Anywhere you've got any kind of culture, you've got somebody trying to con somebody out of something. Now, this like mysterious stranger this whole time is kind of like watching them carefully. And as they leave this festival, Worf is jumped by 3 men with daggers. And this stranger who's been watching them shows up with a phaser and defends Worf and Alexander. And Worf is like, who are you, right? Because in the midst of all this melee, like, this stranger is like blasting people with phasers. Worf pushes Alexander the way and he's like, run, Alexander, which I was like, good for you, Worf. Like, that's a good move. Get your kid to safety. And Worf finally says, who are you? And he says, I'm a friend. Your brother Kern sent me here to protect you. And he is Kintoch to the House of Moog, which means an advisor that is so trusted, he is considered part of the family. And he shows this like ring that he's got of like the House of Moog, apparently. And it's like, oh, okay. So Kern is here, but not here, but he sent you to make sure you guys were safe. Like, so it turns out, now we're on the Enterprise. Recently, rumors began to circulate on the Klingon homeworld that an assassination attempt was going to be made on the House of Moog. So that's why Kern sent him there to make sure nothing would happen to Worf. And I was like, if that's the case, though, but then why didn't Kern just come?
Yeah, but Kern is serving in the council. Like he's running the Klingon council. So he needs to like stay. And apparently
about that. I thought he was like zipping around the galaxy on his little ship.
He was a while back, but now he's, I think, more stabilized.
I guess I blocked out all the Kern shit. I'm like, Kern who?
Totally fine. And and Kimtar, I guess apparently this is like a recognized position in a family. So Worf explains that that Kimtar is like No.
It's his name is Kimtar, but the position he has is Kintok, which is like the trusted advisor. That's like so close. You're part of the family.
Okay, yeah. So
we're learning Klingon up in here today.
So he's so trusted that Worf is just like, cool, like I trust you at face value. And since this is some kind of a role that is common apparently amongst the Klingon people, there was no reason for him to question it. And plus he saved his life. So that really like gives him a lot of credibility.
It really does.
So you're like, okay, well, this is all weird, but I mean, at this point, there's nothing that seems suspicious about this at all. It's like, wow, you were at the right place at the right time. You saved me. You saved my son's life. Awesome. Like, 100%. Let's be friends. Yep. So Worf and Kimtar explain all of this to Riker, and Riker's like, all right, we need to do some investigations. And Kimtar's like, this blade is from the Duras sisters, so they must be after current seat on the council yet again. Like they're pulling out a Throwback Thursday. So Riker's like, well, in that case, we need to find them immediately and cut this crap out. And Kimtar's like, no. You're not going to be able to find them. It's going to be impossible. And Riker's like, I bet we can try. So you're like, this is interesting. Let's see what happens. Yeah. This was a fun, like, are we going to call it A plot or B plot? I don't know. But I thought this was an interesting line in the story to be like, oh, who is trying to kill? Why would somebody try to kill Worf of all people?
Yeah.
Why not Kern?
If Kern is on the seat, why would you? It's like, I'm going to kill, Joe Biden as president at the time of this recording. I'm going to kill his brother so I could have Joe Biden's seat. It's like, what? Like, how does that work?
Kimtar does explain later that Kern has no male heirs, and so Alexander will eventually be the head of the House of Mogh, then the assassination attempt should be on Alexander.
Yeah.
And also, Kern could have a male heir at any point in time. He's a dude. He can have a baby anytime.
This is Terminator. Like, what's her face had this kid who's going to like bring down the destruction of the Terminators, and so they have to send him back in time to kill the kid, not the mom. But okay. Yeah. Also, Riker offers Kimtar quarters aboard the ship. And I just thought, wait a tick, where was Picard this whole time? Because after Picard suggests the Klingon ceremony or like the festival, we do not see him for the rest of the episode. And I went back to be like, did I miss something?
I didn't notice that till you just said that. Yeah, you're right.
Why was he running the meeting? He was in the captain's chair and everything the whole rest of the episode. Where is Picard? Where in the world is Picard?
Maybe he's like playing a flute or something when this is going on. He's on shore leaf. Yeah, I don't know. But we didn't actually need him for this scene. So it worked out. We didn't.
But it just the whole rest of the episode though is weird when like Picard, Riker is filling in for Picard, but there's no, usually it's like, oh, Troy is at a reunion or something, and that like in that captain's log explains why she's not there. But whatever. Okay. Now, there's a moment where, they talk about the fact that Kern doesn't have a male heir, like you said. And so Alexander will be the future of the House of Mogh. So he must prepare himself to be a warrior. And Alexander is like, I don't really want to do that. Right. So Worf is like, he said he doesn't want to do it. So that's when Kimtar is like, perhaps you and I can help spark his interest in his culture to get him like committed to the ascension. And then I'm just going to welcome everybody to the most like lovely, warm, tucking in for bed ever, because Alexander is understandably freaked out by this assassination attempt that has happened and this like violent act that's happened on the planet. So he's all kinds of anxious and scared and worried as he's getting into bed. So Kimtar tucks him into bed and assures Alexander that he too can grow up to become a warrior, and he will be at ease everywhere because he will know how to defend himself and his father should the need arise. And he talks about the homeworld, and there are lakes so clear you could see all the way to the bottom, and your cousins are there and they want to meet. I honestly was sitting on the couch watching this, and I kind of did one of those shoulder things where you like dig yourself into the snuggle cushions more. I snuggled into the cushions because I was so comforted by this like lovely little scene. And Alexander was so grateful.
And it's the way he delivered it too. He was like, you would like it. Your cousins want to meet you. Like everything he was saying, I was like, I want to go. Dang.
I know.
Like he made it sound good. And then you
Can
just
I
see
arrange
like
a transport ship?
Right. And I've never wanted to go to Klingon ever before. But it was this moment where you're like, actually, this sounds pretty nice. And then Worf is kind of listening at the door. And when Kimtar walks out, he like puts his arm, his hand on Worf's arm, like, buddies. And you're just like, how cool is this? And I also was just so amazed at how he accepted help from Kimtar in the first place. Yeah. Because this is such a huge shift from when he first got Alexander after Kalar died, and Troy was like, maybe I could help. And he was like, we don't need any help. I'm fine. And then he was like, I don't really got this. Maybe I need a little help. Like with this, Kimtar was like, how are the boys' fighting skills? And he was like, they're not bad, but they could be better. Like even that was not criticizing, was not like tearing down Alexander like he would have done several seasons ago. And then when he was like, maybe we can do it together, he was like, I would like that, as opposed to being like, he's my son. I'm fine.
I can do this myself.
Yeah. And I just thought, wow, this is a lot of growth, and this is really beautiful. And this bedtime story was wonderful. And you're like, things are looking up for Alexander.
You and I were going to hop on a shuttlecraft and take 22 years to get there. And we were like, doesn't even matter. It sounds so good. It really does. Now, on the bridge, the Duras sisters' trail has gone cold, which Kimtar said would be very hard to find them. They do what I think is an incredibly clumsy and forced collaboration with DS9 when Riker speaks to Quark, who's the Ferengi, on Deep Space Nine, and they bicker about bar winnings, and it's like, oh no, I won that fair and square, which feels very like Lando Calrissian Han Solo, where it's like, you lost, the Millennium Falcon to me fair and square, da da da. But first, I had two thoughts. One, again, where's Picard in all this? Why is Riker running the show? Number one. Number two, you could have had this communication in the ready room.
Or like anywhere else.
On the bridge where everybody could sit, it felt, I gotta say, Riker never felt more Captain Kirk than in this moment, where he's like Mr. Charm and personality and bickering cleverly with a Ferengi to get what he wants. It just felt really weird. But
see, I had the opposite experience. I felt like, wow, this is the perfect cameo for DS9, unlike that stupid Daddy Issues episode. We went to the whole ship of DS9 and it was just dumb. It was just dumb and useless. So I felt like this is what I'm talking about here.
That one.
Yeah. So I was like, this is what I'm talking about. All we needed was a good 2-3 minutes to know that DS9 existed. That's all I needed. I didn't need a whole episode.
See, in my mind, DS9 never existed. So I'm like, can we just keep them separate, please?
I just think maybe they did not do a great job with the handoff because, I don't know how common spinoffs were at the time. Spinoffs like this. I don't know how common spinoffs were at the time. I'm thinking off the top of my head of a few spinoffs that it was like, oh, that was really cool. And it's just hard to do that handoff to be like, it's the same characters, but a totally different story. So I think it's always a little tricky. And I don't know if they ever totally nailed it with the TNG to DS9 transition. So for me,
I don't think they did.
This was like better. This was an improvement to the last thing, which I thought was really pointless.
I fall into the category, like I've like fallen on my own sword on this, but I often say, like, if you're mad at some, you're mad at the new guy at work who takes your chair, and it's like, you probably shouldn't be mad at that guy because that guy didn't know what he was doing, right? Right. So it's like your anger is being directed in the wrong place. Deep Space Nine was brought in to replace TNG because the writers and producers were like, oh, we think we can create something better. And so they canceled TNG to make room for DS9.
Right.
And the handoff did not happen well. The viewership fell dramatically. Like the ratings, TNG is still the highest rated of all the Star Treks out there. And DS9 is like the 5th or 6th. It's like way down there. It's a totally different type of storytelling. And they didn't prepare the viewers for any of that. So I'm still a little mad that DS9 exists.
So this is you being salty, is what you're saying.
Yes, this is me being salty because I'm like, but you took the show I loved to make room for a show I don't care about at all. Like at all.
I also really like Quark.
Like, I shouldn't be mad at DS9 though. It's not their fault.
It's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's the decision maker's fault.
Yeah.
It's probably not even the writer's fault. It's because they don't make decisions. They just write the story.
No, they sure don't.
But I like Quark. I think he is the only Ferengi that that's not true. Okay, Nog, love him. That's a character from DS9. But Quark is such a fun, interesting Ferengi, and not like the dumb Ferengi we've seen all of TNG.
Yeah, he's not the pool noodle Ferengi.
He's not the pool noodle Ferengi, and he's not the Daemon Bach who keeps coming back with a vengeance and just won't either win or lose. Like pick a lane, buddy.
Let it go. Yeah.
So anyways, so this happens and we find out that the trail leads to some Pac-led mining operation where the Duras sisters were trying to do something shady. So, okay, we're off to that. And I just thought, cool, they brought out the Pac-leds. I never would, if it wasn't for Lower Decks, the animated series, that would have went right over my head. I wouldn't have even remembered that or heard that or anything.
Right. So I actually wrote, I think it was a nice nod to having some Pac-leds where you're like, you're bringing these threads together to continuously like reinforce the universe. So I thought that was a nice touch. But I wrote in my notes, rumor has it that the Duras sisters got their hands on some mining equipment and are trying to something MacGuffin. That's what I was like, who cares?
That's about what happened. So moving on. Now we're on the holodeck where Kimtar...
Oh, sorry. One quick thing. Kimtar turns and says, "Congratulations, Commander. I did not think that anyone would find the Duras sisters that fast." And Riker's like, "Yeah, we're the shit," and like walks off. And Kimtar is like,
yes, he does not look excited about it at all.
Kimtar, what are you cooking up over there, buddy? It better be ga.
Yeah, it's like, didn't you want this? Weren't you the one who said?
Yes.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right. So now Kimtar's not excited about it. And we don't know why he's not excited about it, but he's not. So now we go to the holodeck where Kimtar has recreated the mugging, but he's brought Alexander and Worf and they're in their Tai Chi outfits. And he's like, all right, we're going to we're going to do some training exercises. And now you're going to feel like basically, and this is something they do in like therapy where you like revisit a traumatic experience, like do it differently so that you're not the victim in it. So that's basically what he's doing. He's like, we're going to do it again, but this time you're going to fight. And this time you're going to win. You're not just going to be like hiding in a corner. So they redo the whole thing. And Worf is just like, ha, 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 doing his thing. And Alexander is actually doing pretty well to be fighting a grown man when he's a little kid.
He really is.
And he actually almost wins. Like the guy falls to the ground and Kimtar yells like, finish him, kill him. And Alexander's like, wait, I didn't want all that. Like, I just wanted to defend myself, but I didn't want to just like stab some guy in the heart. He doesn't say all that. He just looks horrified. He looks back at the guy on the ground and he just like drops his batleth and walks away.
He surely does.
So the guy on the ground gets up and is about to stab him in the back with a holographic knife when Kimtar's like, freeze program. And he's like, look, Alexander, he was going to, your kindness didn't help at all. He was still going to kill you. You should have killed him when you had the chance, and just really gets on his case about not killing this guy who was trying to kill him. And you know what, I can say I can really relate to not this exactly, but this idea of self-defense versus just like, you know, going all postal
killing.
Yeah. I used to do jujitsu training very briefly, and I remember one day we were learning about chokeholds. And so we were all in pairs, and then we had to like choke each other using whatever techniques we learned. And then one person's choking the other person. The person getting choked has to like do the move so that they like can get out of it or whatever. And I hated that lesson, not just because I got choked, because that was uncomfortable and awkward, but it was me choking somebody else that was even worse. And I talked to the guy who runs the gym. They run like a whole bunch of gyms like this all across the country. And we were having a conversation about it. And he said that's extremely common for women. Women always have that complaint where they feel uncomfortable attacking their attacker. Like, it's not the being attacked part that sucks for them. It's the part where they have to defend themselves with full on like life-saving violence.
Yeah.
It's when you have to choke somebody. It's when you have to like, you know, like take somebody down, not just knock them off, not just pepper spray, but like you have to fight for your life. He was like, that's when women feel really, really uncomfortable. And I was like, you nailed it. Like, how do I get past that? Because if I'm trying to, and the guys that I was, you know, sparring with, they were like, look, this is going to save your life. Like, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to live. And I understand that intellectually.
You got to double tap. Otherwise they'll rise up and come back after you.
Exactly. And I understand that intellectually, but in this safe practice environment, like I don't have that adrenaline and it just feels really weird. So anyways, I can kind of a little bit understand Alexander's like hesitance to do something that's so out of character. But Kimtar just goes off on him about like,
absolutely goes off.
Yeah. Basically growing up and being a man. Basically, he just goes off on him. And Alexander just runs out. You're right, 3 times. This is his second storm off. He runs out. He's like, forget this. And Worf and Kimtar just look at each other like,
oh, Worf's like, told you so. But like, can you blame the kid? His mother died through violence. He now lives in the Federation where everyone gets along perfectly and there's no need for such things. So these are first world problems that Alexander's living in. I was thinking about this same thing, and I know that like a lot of these conversations are kind of derailing, but like there's a lot of stuff on social media where it compares like men in the 1920s to like men today. And the version that they used to compare with men to the 1920s is from Peaky Blinders, where like Cillian Murphy looks super hot with his like Peaky Blinders outfit on, and he's smoking a cigarette and he's about to get into a knife fight. And then they were like, and men today. And it's like, a non-binary guy who's like really happy in makeup on and like dancing around in high heels and a dress or whatever. And it's like, look at how far our society's fallen. It's like, I'm sorry. That is totally the wrong message, in my opinion. I'm like, no.
And what an odd comparison.
First of all, what a stupid comparison, but like that's a comparison that fits that narrative in that person's mind, right? Where they're like, look how manly men were.
That's what they're trying to say, right?
But hold on now. What you're basically saying is, if you want to look at this objectively, men in the 1920s had to fight to the death for all kinds of shit, right? It was a much more turbulent, violent, poverty-stricken time where you had to scrap and like scrabble for every little thing that you had, right? Where we live in 2023 in a culture where like, I mean, inflation prices aside, you don't have to fight to the death almost every day just to survive. So you've opened up safety in the community where now people can feel more free to explore like their sexuality or their non-sexuality or their self-expression. Yeah. Exactly. So it's like, you should be happy that our society is in a place where people feel so safe that they can do this, because
where they're not fighting for every scrap of food, where they're not fighting just to live.
Thank you. Because the opposite is true as well, where it's like you live in such a suppressed and repressed culture where anything outside of the norm is punishable by death, which still in 2023 happens in parts of the world. So it's like, we're talking first world problems here, and you're fucking complaining that Alexander doesn't want to kill. We're like, he witnessed his mother's murder, for fuck's sake. Like, and you know me, I'm the last person to jump on the Alexander support train, but like, here I am. Now the Enterprise
choo-choo.
Motherfuckers, they get to the planet where the mining is happening. And again, Riker's in charge for some reason. They get into the mine and they find this con man, the Uridian, and he gives away the location of the Duras sisters because they're like, you've been caught trading in some sort of illegal whatever the F's. And we could just leave you here to die because there's like no food or anything. And the guy's like, on second thought, I did see them going that way, and they did say they were going to go to Sesame Street. So like, let's just go there. So this guy gets passage off. Now in 10 forward, Kimtar comes to Worf and apologizes for getting so mad at Alexander in the holodeck. And he's like, Worf, I have connections with the Klingon military academy. It'll be tough on the boy, but it'll make him the leader that the House of Moog needs. And thank you, Worf, for finally getting on the good dad train where he's like, no, this is his home. He is my son and he belongs with me. And I was like, yes.
Which again is singing a totally different note.
Growth.
Like when the Rashenkos, when Worf's parents dropped him off, he was like, what are you guys doing here? They were like, we cannot handle this kid, and he's your kid, so peace out. And Worf is like, what do you want me to do with this kid? And now he's at a point where he's like, he actually thought about it for a minute. He was like, ooh, that could be great. He could learn everything he needs to know. He could have like Klingon friends. He could be inundated in the culture. But then he goes, you know what? No, this is his home. He would not thrive in that environment, and I can't do that to him. Like, I thought, yes, that was huge growth. And he could ask him, like, you can always ask Alexander, what do you think about this school? Is this
what do you want to do?
Would you want to try this? You can always ask him, but for him to not just be like, well, I'm the dad and I'm shipping you off to boarding school, I thought was huge.
Exactly
growth.
The kind of shit that Worf would have done
couple seasons
ago.
4
seasons ago, if Alexander was older then. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, he totally would have done that.
And Kimtar can't handle this answer.
Oh, he's really not having it. He's not having it. But you know what? I will say this. I love this growth that Worf has been undergoing, like as a father. And I like to think in my own mind, like in my head canon, like it's that extra time he's been spending with Deanna Troi that like she's been kind of rubbing off on him a little bit more and like kind of coaching him in how to be a better parent and whatnot. And like, it's working because like, look at him being like, no, we're not shipping my son away to like boarding school. That's going to be like sticking him in like a glacier for 2 months to survive or some shit. Like, no,
I'm not sending my little muggle born to Hogwarts. They have killer spiders there.
Yeah,
I'm doing that.
Everything is
granted.
There
we have killer spiders here, but only in one episode.
Yeah.
For the most part, it's and Borg, but for the most part, it's safe.
Yeah, but like
stay
for
right
the most
here.
part, it's okay. Yeah. Now Kimtar goes to Alexander and he's like, "Let me tell you the story of Kahless, the unforgettable." But Alexander has heard that story a million times, and he's like questioning everything about the
like
story.
like a kid. And it's
Kimtar,
so funny that
welcome to
Kimtar,
Parenting 101. He's like,
yes,
but why? But why? But why? Because
Kimtar
that's
actually
why.
goes, no more questions. Just listen to the story and absorb the message. And he's like, okay. And yeah, it's like, wow, Kimtar, you don't know. I thought you knew him so well, but you don't know him at all, because he's got a lot of questions and you are not willing to answer a single one. You want him to just be like awed and amazed by what you're saying.
I love how Kimtar is so annoyed by Alexander being a child, which is like with the plot twist. You're like, oh my God, you're like, so like, yeah. And he does say, like, when humans look at you, they will only see a Klingon. You will never fit in with them. I know a Klingon school you could go to. You'd be welcome there. And this is when Alexander's like, I don't want to do the Ascension. Yep. He gets really shrill.
This is storm off number 3.
Yeah, it really is.
He's done. He's done with, and it's actually a really sad moment before he storms off, because he goes, I thought you were different. I thought you understood me.
Yeah.
It's like, but you're just like everybody else. You're just like my dad. You just want me to be a warrior. You don't care about me as a person, which is really heartbreaking. And then he's just like, forget it, and just like leaves. And I'm like, ooh, Kimtar, I hope you feel bad.
I hope you do. Well, like if anybody has been objectified, it's been Alexander. And he's been objectified not in like a Bond girl kind of way. He's been objectified as like, the boy is coming to live with you. And now we can't handle the boy anymore. It's like, he's not even a person. And that's horrible. So yeah, he storms off. He's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to leave the Enterprise. Now, meanwhile, the Enterprise is closing in on the Duras sisters. They meet the Uridian, who had some partial supply of the ore, and Riker does this fun little gambit where he like explodes the ore, and like the glitter reveals the Duras sisters' ship that's cloaked nearby, and they're like, release us. This is where you get your just desserts, because you get to see Duras. The Duras sisters
I love
don't do
them
it for me, but I know that you love them.
Yeah, I really do. I really, really do. And even this scene where you see them and they're just like, we're holding you for murder. And they're like, who's attempted murder? Like, get out of here. And they're like, well, come on board and we'll tell you. We'll be there. We'll be there right now.
Yeah.
Actually, they made this comment where they were like, Worf's murder. And she was like, too bad they failed.
Yeah. And then both of the sisters are dying laughing.
I just thought it was so funny. And Worf is like, not amused.
He is just less impressed.
Like that stuff like that. I just think it's so funny.
What attempted murder? Worf's? Too bad
it failed. Yeah, you're just like, I don't know. So they're just so funny, because even when they're being like threatened with something big, they still have so much personality. They've got
a lot of venom. Yeah, they really do.
Yes.
But now we've got, they beam over and talk about the assassination attempt. They beam over and talk about the assassination attempt, and Worf shows them the blade of the House of Duras. And Kimtar is like, I'm going to send a message to Kern to meet us at the homeworld, because we are going to get to the bottom of this once and for all. Now, after he leaves, one of the Duras sisters is like, the blade, look. And it shows one of the sisters' sons. But they're like, wait, I wasn't aware that you had a son. And she's like, I don't, but I am with child. And she just found out a few days ago and has told no one but her sister, who in turn has told no one. So where did this knife come from? And the way they asked it too was like,
how can this marking be here? Where did this come from?
Damn. Damn.
Yeah. This is why I like them, right? Like, yes, the way that they were like, how can this be? Like, explain this. And you're like,
so good.
Oh shoot, we didn't even know that we can't really explain that. Yeah, just the way they did it, it just puts them on the spot, and they're like, well, how could this be? Where did this come from? Wait a minute, it came from Kimtar. It's like all of that kind of happens in seconds from the forcefulness of the Duras sisters being like, explain this, like what the heck is going on? So next thing you know, we're back in Worf's quarters, and we see that Kimtar is pulling out some kind of disruptor weapon. And Andy,
like the same one he used to protect Worf.
Yeah, is now he's going to use to like murder Alexander in his freaking bed, which is so dark. And you're like, wait a minute, I thought he was on their side this whole time. I thought he was their friend. I thought he was a trusted advisor. And now he's actually trying to murder Alexander. It's so weird. And Worf catches him just in the nick of time and is about to beat the living daylights out of this man with his bare hands.
Yeah. He did like the Klingon knuckle of death kind of thing.
Yeah. He's about to bash his brains in. Understandably so. You were trying to shoot his child in his sleep. Like, whatever Worf does to you at this point, you brought it on yourself, is what I think. Did. And right before Worf punches him in the face and ends him, he goes like, stop, father. I am your son. I am Alexander. And Worf is like, what the? this grown man is trying to talk about he's Alexander. Alexander's the one you just almost shot in his sleep.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I swear.
By the way, he gave that secret up really, really fast.
I mean, in that moment, he didn't have much time to hold secrets much longer.
Not.
This was like going to be his last few seconds on this ship and in the world of living people. That
was the most complicated way to say that. That was so great.
In the world of living people. I need a nap. So anyways, he gives up the secret. And just long enough for Worf to be like,
what the hell?
Okay, let me hear your story. Like I'm not going to kill you.
He basically says, like, tell me something only Alexander would know. You know, like, what were your mother's last words? What were Kalar's last words? Or
he
whatever.
Quizzes him, which is a good quiz question because he was the only one in the room when Kalar died.
Yep. And he answers it perfectly. He does this whole song and dance about how she put her hand in his hand, and then she was like, Worf, and then she said Alexander, and then she gave her last breath, or some shit like that. But it's like, okay, yeah. So the story checks out. But let me just go ahead and pause here. Like, yes, he knew the quiz question. Like, he knew the answer. But we're just going to believe him just like that? We're not going to run like a full spectral analysis on this mofo or like check his DNA or anything? We're not going to do any of that? We're just going to listen to him? Okay. This for me is where the wheels fell off the episode, where I was like, okay, this is dumb now. So Kimtar is not Kimtar. He's Alexander from 40 years in the future.
When you think about it, means this whole entire time he is Alexander, reliving his youth, getting a chance to like heal his inner child and all of that. And it really puts
he does a terrible job.
It puts a new spin on self-loathing because he's yelling at himself and he's like so not liking the path that he's on as a little kid. And he was about to shoot himself for being who he is.
Yes. Well, so here's the reason he's here. He's here to protect Worf because Alexander ended up going into like diplomacy and was trying to pursue this like path of righteous peace. And he thought that he could like heal the Klingon divisions with his words and whatnot.
Yeah, he wanted to unite all the houses, which is not at all what Klingons are about. So he tried to do that, and that led to complete upheaval and violence and Worf's ultimate death in his arms. And so he was like, I should have never become a diplomat. I should have become a warrior. Only I had known more about my culture and more about fighting, I would have won that fight or never done something so stupid as tried to bring all the houses together. So this was his thinking, and he found some kind of technology, something that sent him back, something. We don't know any of that.
He didn't even explain any of that. He's like,
well, he said, I met a man. He said, I met a man in such and such system who had a technology that allowed me to.
Oh,
okay. So he explained it very briefly.
Rolling my eyes so hard I couldn't even hear.
That's probably what happened. Okay. Yeah, it was a very, very short description, and there was no like scientific like he didn't say it was a ship, or he didn't give any like details of how the man.
I met some mysterious stranger who sold me a 3-headed dog. Yeah,
exactly.
So Worf hears that he's died in Alexander's arms 40 years in the future, and less than 1 second later he goes, "You must not blame yourself." Like, what the fuck, Worf? You're just taking all this in just like that. This is like Beverly being like, "You want to leave Starfleet and go live with the Traveler?" What? Okay, well, if that is the way that you want to live, I guess I have to. What the hell is going on here? So Kimtar, who's Alexander, staged that assassination attempt to scare Alexander into becoming a warrior instead of what he'd really become, a diplomat that thought he could single-handedly bring peace to the homeworld. And, you know, this is in those diplomatic negotiations, as you said, that the enemy moved against them and struck Worf down. So Worf is like, have faith. We do not know what will happen now that you've disrupted the timeline. What? Wait a second. You're telling me you have a time traveling son that here he's telling you you've been murdered, and you don't have like the whole team on this conversation like every other time travel episode? You're just going to have a nice little intergalactic chit chat with this dude who just tried to kill your son as he slept? Okay.
Yeah, usually when we find like a clone, or like when we found the second Riker, for example, they run all the scans, they compare the memories. Or that professor who was
stealing shit, Rasmussen. Yeah, like let's get like a scan. Yeah.
They do a scanny scan or something to be like, okay. And then they all talk about it in the observation lounge, and they all decide what they're going to do next. Here's a few things I would have liked to happen in this episode just for that part to be laid to rest. I would have liked to see a scan. I would have liked to see some discussion of this character. I
Yeah.
also would have liked to have a little more explanation about the time travel and that it's temporary, like because he disappears like in the next scene. So I would have liked to see more like, well, this technology only works for like 72 hours or something like that, where he's like, I was on a tight timeline to make the biggest difference I could, and I figured if I couldn't save you, then I wasn't worth living, or something. Like I would have liked a little more like, I don't have to know all the details of how he got there or how he gets back, ? But they don't explain that. He's just gone. He's just gone in the next scene.
Yeah,
like, did he go back to the future? Did he die? Did he disappear? Like,
there's so many question marks there. I would have loved to have seen at the very least Beverly do a scan and be like, his, DNA and RNA matches exactly. Yeah. It is Alexander, but his
cells have aged 40 years more.
Exactly, right? Where it's like his introns are 40 years older than these. If we're going to use introns incorrectly, we might as well sprinkle them here too. But yeah, something like that would have been really nice to be like some confirmation.
His T cells are 40 years older than they should be.
His viral T cells, by the way, which are not even a thing.
Yeah.
So no, that would have been nice.
But we don't get that. So I can understand why that would frustrate you.
Yeah, but like the suspicious part of me is like, look, this guy knows what happened when Kalar died, but he could have made his best guess. Like, con men and con women will like give you information that you think only a certain someone will know. But it's kind of like fortune telling, right? It's like they're telling you some vague generalities, but with just enough specifics to make you be like, you must be talking about me, right? So I felt like that was too easy. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more science behind that, but okay, whatever. But I will say this, they do have this really beautiful moment where Worf says, the cause of peace is a just cause. Keep fighting for peace. I know now that my son has his own destiny. So that kind of puts to bed all of Worf's concerns about like, my son isn't a warrior. He's not going to be a true Klingon. He's not going to be. And even Worf says like, if I die, but I die at peace knowing that like you were trying to do something honorable and just. And I was like,
right. And he says, I die with honor. And for a Klingon, there's no higher calling than that, which is very Klingon.
Exactly. And they hug and Alexander says, I love you, father. And Worf says, I love you, Alexander. And that's when I had to pause and just bawl my eyes out because it's a very sweet moment.
A really sweet scene. And I think like this is what, and this kind of bleeds into my final thoughts of why I love this, is because this was like Worf gets the Father of the Year award episode. And even when he's talking to like future Alexander, when he's talking to Kimtar, he's just like, now that you've done this, who knows? I might die tomorrow. I might live forever. Yeah. But the fact that I now know that you have that you had a destiny and you did it and it was amazing and it was grand and what a beautiful vision. Now I can rest easy knowing my son does have a good head on his shoulders. He is going to do something great. And I'm so proud of you, and like, that's all that this was. That's all that Worf cared about with being the whole, like it's the time of ascension and blah, 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 is he just wanted Alexander to be happy, healthy, and safe. And Alexander was. He was just so upset that Worf died and feeling guilty like it's his fault. And he single-handedly, personally killed Worf by putting him in that situation.
Yeah.
And for him to get the healing of Worf saying like, no, what you did was good and right. And it didn't work out. Yeah. Sometimes it's like that, but you did the right thing and you should do the right thing. So it was just such a freaking beautiful moment. In our next scene, we're in the holodeck and Alexander is there with his little outfit and his batleth and he's ready for part 2. He's like, all right, this time I'm going to kill this dude because that's what you guys want. So I'm like, I'm ready. I think I'm ready.
He's ready to people please. It's actually quite sweet and sad.
Yeah. And Worf is just looking at him like, oh, and Alexander's like, where's Kimtar? I'm ready for training today. And Worf's like, he had to go away. And this is where I would love to, know why that was. And then Alexander's like, but he never even said goodbye. And you're like, ugh. Like, he's even though this guy's only been here for like 3 days, they've formed such a strong bond over these 3 days. Yeah. Which talk about healing your inner child, right? It's just beautiful. And then really Worf's like, he told me to tell you goodbye for him.
It was an urgent matter or something.
Yeah. And then Alexander's like, well, will I ever see him again? And Worf's like, it may be sometime, right? Because he will see himself in the mirror in 40 years. But because this is a different timeline, he's never going to know that or remember that. So it's like, you will see him again, but you're not going to see him.
Not in the way that you think.
Yeah. Just such an interesting moment. And then Alexander's like, okay, well, I'm ready to practice anyways. And Worf is just like, you know what? There's going to be plenty of time for that later. Let's just go hang out.
Let's go get an ice cream and 10 forward.
Yep. And Alexander's like, huh?
Okay.
I'm down for ice cream, water balloon fights in the hallway, and they just leave. And I was just like, this is what being accepted for who you are looks like. And it was really great.
That is really, I can see your smile, but I could hear how much you're smiling when you said that sentence. Like your smile was so big. Yeah.
He just is
totally
like, he like finally accepted Alexander after all these years, not because he didn't love Alexander, but because he wanted what was best for him. And now he has that peace of mind that Alexander's going to be okay.
Yes, that he will be okay. So there's a couple of plot holes that don't get any wrap up.
Nope.
For example,
never.
The Duras sisters, like they're just going to go fly around the galaxy and tell anyone who will listen about this super sus blade that's like from the future ? Like they just went on their merry way then? Like, where are they? Are they being sequestered or no? Like, no.
Or does Starfleet now owe them a huge apology and explanation for how this blade came to be?
Sorry, we faked this blade. It's not actually from the future. And if you sign here and tell, that you're never going to tell anybody about this.
Or just like, sorry for like, capturing your ship and bringing you on board and accusing you of attempted murder. Turns out you were set up. My bad. Something like that.
By this dude who we did 0 background checks on. Like, even when he beamed over, like the biofilters on the transporter should have detected. It's like, hold on, we've got a DNA match with somebody who's already aboard the ship. Like, that's a loophole.
I don't think the filters do that, but they should do that because all of our evil clone episodes would be a lot easier to spot.
Sure would. I mean, it would be as easy to spot as like when Lore is pretending to be Data and uses contractions, and you're like, oh, that's the bad guy. I really enjoy seeing a more practiced and mature relationship between Worf and Alexander. But to reference last week's episode, this new mature relationship kind of removed the stain, but not of blood, just of severe annoyance that I have with them, where I was like, okay, they're actually really, really sweet. But I do think that this time travel explanation is somehow even weaker than the explanation we got of like a lover who lives in an old candle. Like, this is just the stupidest time travel. Like,
we got way more explanation on that lover in the candle. We got way more backstory.
Being that needs this plasma to survive.
And their peptides match his peptide needs perfectly. The chemical balance, like they had a whole. And that only took like 3 sentences, and they had a whole backstory for that guy.
Still dead. Yeah, but like, it's like you've got a lover in an old candle that's been romancing 7,000 years of Howard women, which is so gross. But this explanation was like
absent,
so much weaker than that. I was like, can we at least see you get in your ship that like beams away? I don't know,
or something, or like a cool little watch that like beams you, or something kind of something.
Like, it's like a transporter beam, but with a little bit more glitter, so it like looks extra magic,
or different color glitter.
Something. Like you and I are going to go ahead and fix that. We're going to write that wrong from the sound of our brainstorm. But like overall, I actually really enjoyed this episode. I thought it would be terrible because I was like, blech, Alexander, but it really was great, and I loved seeing how different their relationship could be as father and son without being so antagonistic. It was more, there was some antagonism there, but it was like Worf's worry and concern about Alexander. And then it was tempered by this news. And so then he's like, okay, as you said, like he knows his son is going to be all right. So he's more free to pursue his own path, which I really, really like for him.
With his father's full support.
With now blessing. Yeah.
As opposed to his father being like a diplomat, really a diplomat. Instead of all that, he's going to be like, oh, cool. You want to go into diplomacy? That's great. Like, it's just going to be cause. It's just going to be supportive. I felt like I put in my notes, this episode is like daddy issues resolved. Because, the episode with, him and Data and all of that, and then him going back to Kittimer, which I really like that episode. Not the first one, but the second one that I just mentioned. I really like. Yeah. And we call it, like you called that the daddy issues episode. And I feel like this is daddy issues resolved. Like this is like not only between Alexander and Worf, but also between Alexander and Alexander. There's like some personal issues resolved with accepting yourself, because K'Ehleyr definitely did not accept herself.
She sure didn't. And that was sad because she kicked ass.
She was so cool. And Alexander did accept himself until his dad died because of his folly in his mind. Then he was like, oh, my dad was right all along. Everything he's been saying was right. Everything I did was wrong. Who I am is wrong. What I've done with my life is wrong. And then he started to question his whole life. And now to have that resolution to be like, no, like, and to have the support from being a little kid where his dad's going to be like, whatever path you pick, I'm there for you. I'm supportive of you. You're going to do great. It's just a different experience. I can even say that from my personal experience. My parents, when I was a kid, it was very much like, do good in school, work hard, and you'll get a good job. Like, it was very much like work hard. That was a big thing in my family. But it wasn't like supportive. Like, my parents didn't come to any of my awards or my games or my track meets, or like anytime I was celebrated, my parents were never there because they were constantly working. Like, they worked overtime, double time, weekends. Like, they worked all the time to try to like feed and clothe us. So they were never there. But as an adult, my mom is like my number one cheerleader. And I can only imagine what that would have felt like when I was a kid. To have her just be like, and it's not that she was a detractor. She wasn't like Worf being like, what you're doing is stupid. She never did that.
Yeah, she just was absent, working to support you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
She was absent for good reasons, so I could live. But like, I just think like she's so supportive when I say things that I'm like, oh, she's going to be like, this is kind of crazy. She'll be like, oh yeah, you could totally do that. I could totally see you doing that. And it's going to be great. And I'm like, wow, how would that feel when I was like 8 or 9,
This is the armchair psychologist in me, which I guess I'm doing a lot of the last week and this week, but I wonder if her going the extra mile to be extra supportive is because she feels guilt about not being able to support you that way when you were a child.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think it's just who she is now. She's a different person than she was 30 years ago. She's a completely different person, because with my little brother, she's always been this way. And he's quite a bit younger than me. So like she's just changed. She has changed. Yeah, her priorities have changed. What she thinks is important has changed. Her relationship with her family, not just me, her siblings, her mom, it's all changed. So when my brother says some crazy thing like, I'm going to be a YouTube celebrity and I'm going to be a rapper, and I'm just like, boy, you better get a job. That's what I say. And my mom goes, you can totally do it if you try really hard. And I'm like, who is this woman? Like, I remember when she said that when I was in college, and she said that to him, and I was like, who is this lady? What has happened to my mother? Like, she's just all like, supportive and accepting. And like, if you can do it, who is this person? So she's just a different person now. And she's that way with everybody. Like, she is addicted with TikTok. And every time she sees people on TikTok selling things, like there's this one lady who sells hats, and she's been watching her for a while. So she used to sell hats on a little table, but now she's graduated to a whole like space. So she's got hats on the wall because she's got a hat selling like location now.
Yeah.
So yeah, like a storefront. And so my mom has seen her growth, and my mom bought hats from her to like support her business. My mom leaves like positive comments on her video. You know what I mean? Like, my mom is just little miss, like cute. Support everybody.
Sunshine.
Nowadays, which she was not growing up. And I love how she is now. I love it. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. And I think
awesome that you can have that relationship with her now, though. Like,
and I love that.
Like, you two go on, you and I love Harry Potter, and your mom does too. And you took your mom to like Harry Potter World, like in Orlando, Florida, and did like a whole thing. Like, you two
and we had so much fun.
Like such a fun time. Like, I love to see that relationship so much. Like, and like, I love how our relationships with our parents can change as we get older. And I think that's
thank God.
That's a big sort of theme to this episode this week. My mom has always hated my like silly, mischievous side. But in recent years, especially since I have nieces and nephews and she sees how I am with them, she's like, wow, you are really, really good at that. Like, that's actually a talent. And like, I don't have that, and you do. So she's actually come to really appreciate my silly side a lot more.
Yeah, it's great. And like, last week's episode was similar. We saw Wesley and Beverly changing the nature of their relationship as Wesley got older. Now Alexander and Worf's relationship is changing as he's getting older, and it's becoming healthier, which I understand, because little kids are just a whole lot. Teenagers are also a whole lot.
And they don't have the tools or the language to like express how they feel. And I know that the show is doing this, and they're doing the closure episodes because we're so close to the end. We're only like 4 or 5 episodes away from the end of TNG, which I don't even want to think about. But they need to wrap this up, where it's like Alexander and Worf's relationship has been so effing contentious and horrible this whole time. You can't really end on that. Like, Worf has to show some serious growth, and so does Alexander, and he does here. So it does actually end up really well. So now we know, even though we're not going to see Alexander again, I don't think, he's going to be fine. And Worf and him are going to be just fine. It's like those movies, like when the mom dies and she was the glue that held them together, and then they fought and fought and fought, which is exactly like what happened here, except that Worf like didn't even know he had a son. But it's the same type of thing where it's like struggle, 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 struggle. And then now we know they'll be all right. So it's a nice little wrap up. Oh my gosh, that was a lot. On that note, guys, thank you so much for nerding out with us. Next week, we are breaking down Season 7, Episode 22, Bloodlines. Thank you so much for nerding out, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.